Joining us on this edition of the News Review, we have Press TV's very own Johnny Miller, who's joining us from Moscow. Also, we have researcher at Institute for Russian and Eurasian Studies, Mr. Greg Simons, who's joining us from Uppsala, Sweden. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Let's start off with Johnny Miller. Johnny, walk us through the recent comments made by the Russian president. He believes that there's a Western plot to break up the Russian Federation into dozens of different states.
Well, I think he's right in suggesting that that's certainly a desire of the West. I think this war in Ukraine has three elements. First of all, it's a civil war between Ukrainian nationalists and its Russian-speaking population, particularly in the south and in the east. Second of all, it's an attempt by Russia to secure, as it sees it, its geostrategic security, in particular Crimea, and they do want to take some land in order to achieve that aim, and also to stop NATO expansion and demilitarization of Ukraine. And thirdly, it's an attempt by NATO countries, in particular the United States, to damage Russian power. And I think that's what Vladimir Putin is alluding to there. This war isn't really about Ukraine anymore. It's a war between NATO and the West, a war between the United States' attempts to retain its global hegemony and Russia's attempts to reassert itself in the world, and as they see it, to protect their own interests. So that's very much what the war in Ukraine has become about. And the fear is also that, I'm in Moscow at the moment, and there really is not much of a feeling that there is a war going on here. Russian society is carrying on as normal. The sanctions haven't really damaged Russian people too much. Russia can mobilize a lot more of its manpower, a lot more of its economy if it needs to, whereas Ukraine is really mobilizing almost its entirety of its abilities. The fear is also that this war between the West and the East may not stop with Ukraine. It may spread elsewhere.
Greg Simons, following up on the comments made by the Russian president, why would the United States and its allies benefit from a broken and fragmented Russia?
Well, it's always been along that this is a desire to break it up. I mean, they've even produced a map of how they would like to see it broken up. So, but the point is, Russia is a subject and not an object of international relations at the moment. They want Russia to be not even a vassal state, a client state, like it used to be under Yeltsin until the end. So they don't want independent foreign policy, independent politics. They want Russia to do their bidding. I mean, this is what the US has always wanted from other countries around the world. This is not about partnerships or symmetrical relations. It's always been about asymmetry with the US and their unipolar hegemony.
Greg Simons, staying with you, the Russian president once again warned that increasing NATO involvement in the war could lead to a direct confrontation with Russia as this war drags on. And NATO countries continue to pump more arms and ammunition into Ukraine. The prospect is still there that this could spill over or morph into something bigger, and with it also result in a direct confrontation with Russia. Break that down for us, please.
Well, yes. I mean, there's always that issue, of course. From the comments and the analysis you're getting from Russia is much more, sober and realistic than these kind of jingoistic slogans and catchphrases coming from the West. The West has been at the top for too long and show all the signs of being an empire in decline. And when an empire goes in decline, the first part of an empire that goes into decline are things like its intellectual capacity and its ethical standing. And you can see this in the West now. And so, yes, when you get things like this declining, this increases the possibility for something spreading. I mean, if we look at how World War I started, quite innocently, but it rapidly spread. The fact that this has not spread already much more than it has, I mean, it's no small miracle. and that's not owing to the West that uses Orwellian language about war for peace.
John, you talked to us about the possibility of this spilling over into other regions, ultimately leading to a direct confrontation between Washington and Moscow, which obviously would have devastating consequences for the entire world.
Yeah, so we're on a bit of a knife edge at the moment. Increasingly, that knife edge is getting sharper. First of all, between the direct confrontation in Ukraine, United Kingdom very much spearheading certainly Europe's involvement in Ukraine, giving cruise missiles, some kind of cruise missiles now as well. Russia keeps saying that the West is getting closer and closer to crossing this red line, and that they will pay. But Russia has said that numerous times already, and the West keeps pushing them to see how far they can go. So there's a real threat there in terms of what's going to happen in Ukraine. Also, fears of Poland, the Baltic states. There's a lot of animosity towards pro-Russian people in Baltic states at the moment. A lot of anti-Russian feeling in Poland. Although Seymour Hersh, the investigative journalist, said that there's some people in Poland and the Baltic states are pushing for peace now. So there's a lot happening behind the scenes, and I think we're very much on a knife edge that soon Ukraine is increasingly running out of manpower, the ability to carry on fighting this war. And as I said, Russia does have a lot more, much greater ability to carry on this war. So at some point, I think that Ukraine is going to run out of the ability to carry on this war. And what happens then? Does NATO just retreat from Ukraine, or does it go all in? Well, that could be a very dangerous point. And if Ukraine does, in the end, run out of its ability to fight, well, then what happens next? Does this war between NATO and Russia just end? Between NATO and China and Russia end? Between Iran end? Or will it continue in some other form? So that's very much the fear at the moment, that after Ukraine, or even as Ukraine's going on, it may still spread.
All right, thanks a lot, gentlemen. Press TV's Johnny Miller joining us from Moscow, and Greg Simon speaking to us from Uppsala, Sweden. With that, it brings us to an end here on this edition of the Newsary, but stick around, there's plenty more to come here on Press TV.